Welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and we are picking up here with Wilbur, Orla, and friends, continuing as we play solo Classic Traveler, but not using Classic Traveler, instead using Cepheus Universal, which, as I think I say at the beginning of virtually every one of these episodes, I think is appropriate, given that Paul Elliott of Zoser Games, right, put together both this pay what you want, playing solo Classic Traveler, and also put together Cepheus University. So there we have it. So the next step is what we're doing. I'm actually going to combine two of the steps, which I talked about in the previous video, and that was the subsector and the capital. Okay, so here's what happens with these steps. So the subsector, you're supposed to create at least a handful of worlds around your starting world. So our starting world was Tanis, which I just put in the middle of our hex grid here. And then this is the subsector map. And then and they said, well, create, three worlds or something like that around your starting world. Um, but I decided just to keep going and create the whole sector or the whole subsector because I actually enjoyed this process. I mean, I could honestly just sit around and print out a bunch of these maps and just create worlds all day, just rolling up the random stuff on rolling the dice and all that. Right, so what I decided to do in order to figure out where the worlds were, there are two different methods that I've thought about. One is kind of the traditional method, is that you go through hex by hex, right? And you roll a d6, 1 through 3, there's no world there. 4 through 6, there is a world there. So it's a 50-50 shot of each of these hexes containing a world. Now, another method, which I got from the game Worlds Without Number suggests that you use the same hex grid, so it's 8 across, 10 long, uh, and roll a d8 and a d10, and do that 20 times, and then that will determine where 20 of the worlds go. And if you happen to roll something where there's already a world there, then you just move towards the edge of the map, toward the nearest edge of the map. Then you would roll a d10 after that and add that many additional worlds in order to connect where the different um, clusters of worlds, just so that everything's accessible. Because what's the point of having a world created if it's not accessible? And I really like that method, so I decided to go that direction. Right, so I rolled 20 times the d8 and the d10, and then I rolled, I forget, it's like a 5 or something like that on the d10. So total, we have about 25 worlds here or so. Although I decided to limit myself based on the fact that one of the tools that you get with Cepheus Universal is this subsector data sheet, right, where you can list out every single world. Right? And I decided, well, let's just have the number of worlds be equal to the number of lines. Right, so that's what I did. Right, so I counted the number of lines here, and with that, I forget what the exact number is, but it's somewhere 25-ish. Okay. All right. Then what I did, right, I decided I was going to create the worlds enough to fill out the map. Right. And what that means, some of them you can see that I went further. Right. So some of the nearby worlds, I did in fact do the whole creation process, but I wanted everything to have enough to fill out the map, which was really requiring a few things. One thing that I needed to know was, is there water on this world? If there's water, right, then we fill it in. A second thing that I needed to know was what kind of space station is there if there is one here? Um, in order to do that, I need to know the population. So when you go through the um, codes here, the way we read them, the first one, this would be the size of the world. Now, for comparison, an Earth-like world, I believe, has a score of 8 or something along those lines. Here, let me look it up real quick. I have the right next to me. So Earth and Venus, we'd be about an 8 on this scale. Right, so 9 is slightly larger than Earth, 5 is smaller than Earth. Mars is about a 4. This 3 here would be, I think, about the size of Mercury, that kind of thing. All right, so you start with that. Then you use that information in the next step, which is to determine the uh, the atmosphere. Right. So the atmosphere would be the next number here, or sometimes it's letters. So the C here indicates a 12. Right? So The atmospheres are going to range from 0, indicating there is no atmosphere at all the way up to 12, indicating an insidious atmosphere. So an insidious atmosphere is one that is exceptionally corrosive and problematic for any kind of life being there. It's very, very dangerous to be there. Now, an Earth-like atmosphere is going to be 6. Okay, so anything that's a 6 is going to be Earth-like, which is to say it's standard pressure, but at the same time clean. Okay, whereas a 7 would be standard pressure, but it's a tainted atmosphere, so you have to have some kind of breathing apparatus, some kind of filter to protect you in that case. All right, so that's that. The next step, right, is the hydrographics. So that'd be just a matter of how much water is there on the planet. Right? And that number is going to range from a 0 to A. So 0 indicating it's a totally dry world, there is no water on it at all. A indicating it's totally water covered. So naturally, Earth then would be something like a 7 or 8, something in that range. I believe, yeah, 7 is actually it, because 7 captures 75% water. Okay, so there's that. Then the next step is population, right? So that'd be the last number you see here. Now this would be um, the number of zeros, I guess, that follow um, a multiple of 10. So basically, 1 indicates you have somewhere in the tens of people here. A 7 indicates you have millions of people, right? 4 indicates you'd have thousands of people, that kind of thing. Oh wait, no. 4 is tens of thousands, 7 is tens of millions. Yeah, yeah. Okay. That's right. So you need population. Then once you have population, that provides a modifier for your starport role. Right? So your starport is here. It's going to be a letter between A and E, or alternatively, it's going to be an X. X indicates that you do not, in fact, have a starport at all. Right? So that's that. Okay, so that is what we have here. Now, one thing that you might notice as you're looking at this list, there are lots and lots of X's. Because what I decided I wanted to do was have the um, capital be the planet that is one relatively centrally located and two has an A level starport. It turns out when I rolled the thing, there's only one planet that has an A level starport, and it's way up here on the edge of the subsector. Right, so my capital then, oh, let me actually write that name in. I've not named most of these planets yet. So Masuyama is the name of the capital here. There's that. Oh, I also wanted to know bases because bases also get put on the map. So I just have a label of an N or an S. Now I know traditionally you would use a star or a triangle, or there might also be a square or something like that. These various symbols. I just used N or S. N indicating that there's a naval base. S indicating it's a scout base. And so those two are here. Now, there aren't very many bases. We have scouts on Tanis, scouts also on this planet up here. We also have naval bases down here and here. Interestingly, no bases at all got rolled on our cap. Okay. I also wanted to know whether there would be a gas giant. Gas giants are important for refueling purposes, and we found gas giants anywhere that I put a little dot here to the upper right of the planet it has a gas giant. Now, gas giants, like I said, are important for refueling purposes, so that means that when you're plotting courses, you probably want to spend your time close to gas giants. So as we're moving from Tanis to Masayama, I suspect the path we're going to follow is going to be something like this, because that puts us with gas giants all the way, which is going to make it easy for us to refuel all the way there, despite the fact that there are so few bases. Now, another thing that I noticed when I pulled this out, I just want to show this as well. So remember that last number here, that's our population number. Uh, One thing you'll notice though is that even though I have lots of X's, there's population in virtually all of them. Right? So here we have no starport at all, yet we have population of a few or in the tens, that kind of thing. This one, that's unpopulated. Here populations in the hundreds of thousands. Right? Here, populations in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands again. Okay, that one's unpopulated. What else? This one. Okay, that one's unpopulated. This one in the tens of thousands. This one, again, a few in the thousands, a few. Right, so we have lots of places that don't have starports, but nonetheless have populations, sometimes into the hundreds of thousands, which to me suggests that a lot of this subsector is newly colonized. Right, so a lot of this, it's not so much that it's impossible for us to have a starport here, it's just that we have not built that starport here yet. So let's just look at one of these that's relatively high population but doesn't have a starport. So I think five might be the largest number that I saw for any of these. Five. Yeah. So let's just look at this one. Right, so this one here, it's kind of an interesting world when you break it down. Right, so breaking it down, what do we have? We have B, so it's a very large world. Right, so B, I think that might even be the largest that you can get. Let me double check that in terms of size. Oh no, no, you can actually go much larger. Oh, right, right, because you can go all the way to a G. Right, so this is a big, big planet. It's so big that it in fact has almost twice Earth's gravity. Okay, so it's a pretty big world. Then A here, A indicating our atmosphere. This would be not a great atmosphere. It's a very unfriendly atmosphere. And A would be considered exotic. Exotic indicates that it's really kind of unusual in some fashion. So I need to figure out exactly what that is if I'm going to develop this world a little bit more closely. Then eight here. So this is a world of about 80% water. So we do have some significant islands where people could live. And clearly we have people doing that because there are about 100,000 here. So this is considered a water world, but at the same time, it is not entirely or almost entirely water. Okay, so that is what we have uh, here. So this is a world where, like, you can see certain amounts of it that would make it habitable, but at the same time, it certainly would be just some challenges. The heavy gravity is going to be hard on people. The nasty environment is going to be hard on people. So we need to think very carefully about what this world looks like uh, when I come to develop it further. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of develop. I'm not going to do this here in this. I just want to talk about what the subsector looked like. But as we travel, which is going to be happening over the next several sessions, what I'm going to do is, I'll probably off camera, I will develop the planets in our path. Right, so that is my goal here. Right, so what I'm hoping now, I need to think some about why our party is heading toward Matsuyama. Because I know the goal is when they get there, they're going to get their ship. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to get their ship immediately when they get there, but they are going to get their ship when they're there at some point. And that will provide them the freedom to then start moving around and all of that. Now, I've also been thinking a little bit about, so one thing that I'm thinking about. One is that in terms of our party and what their desires are, what we know about Wilbur is that Wilbur really is just looking to not be as stressed. I mean, really, when I looked at my notes about him, right, the big reason that he left, right, is that his career was crushing him. So he wants something that is less stressful. Right? So I think so. He's hoping that being a traveler is going to provide him with some level of freedom that he would otherwise not have, and that is why he is doing what he is doing. I'll look at the other two. Things get a little bit more interesting because we have Garrett. Garrett is seeking fortune. That was really his goal, right, when he left. When he left, I guess, home or um, his profession, as such as it was. He's really looking for um, fortune. So that would explain some of why he might want to go to the capital. The capital, after all, well, we know the capital right now. Very little about it. Right. We know, well, let's actually talk about the capital here, right? So it does have starbase level of A, right, which is the most advanced starbase. It's considered an excellent starbase. And let me actually, I've created a whole sheet here for Masoyama. So I'm just going to go through that. There we go. This provides both the code and then also the explanation of the code as well. Right, so in terms of political alignment, I've said, well, this is the capital. There are gas giants here in the system, which is going to be good for refueling. That would and it'd be hard to have a capital without some easy ability to refuel. Fortunately, the starport can also provide you with refined fuel, so it's perfectly fine here. Okay, so the starport is considered excellent in that it can provide basically any repairs you want. It can build new starships and the like, and also it has uh, whatever kind of refueling you need. In terms of the size of the planet, it's relatively small. It's about Mars sized, which means the gravity is a little bit on the light side. In terms of the atmosphere is somewhat thin. It has, pressure about half of what you'd find on Earth. But I haven't filled out any of the details yet. One thing we know is that because it is not tainted, this would be a breathable atmosphere. While it is on the thin side, it is also something where human beings could actually survive uh, outside in this. So I'm rather thinking about, um, if mountain climbing or something like that, the pressure is somewhat less right, as you get toward the top of the mountain, but you can still breathe it. Right? It's might be a little more challenging for you if you're exerting yourself or what have you. In terms of the description for the hydronomic, sure, hydrographics, there are a few small islands. So it tells us that the population we have, which is in the tens of millions, right, is going to be very concentrated right, on these islands. Because after all, we have about 90% of the planet is water. Now, another really, really important point. This So population of 7, that indicates tens of millions. Government is a 9. 9 is the same as the government we have on Tanis, right? And that tells us that it's an impersonal bureaucracy, right? So odds are that this is something, I mean, I imagine you take the Empire in Star Wars and remove the Emperor. You're just going to have the bureaucracy running things. Now, not necessarily evilly, maybe, we don't know. But what we do know is the law level is a D, which is extremely high, right? So the way you get to this law level, you roll 2d6, right? Then you subtract 7 off of that, and then add your government onto that. So a D indicates it's A is a 10, B, C, D, so a total of 13. So what happened here was that I rolled an 11, right? And that meant that I take my 11 minus 7 is 4. Add your government modifier to that. You're at a 13B. So that indicates that law enforcement is everywhere and is extremely, extremely draconian as far as that goes. Right. So that is why travel zone code is amber. Right. So travelers are um, warned that this is a very strict planet. Like weapons are entirely banned on this planet. Right? You should not even have them in your home, that kind of thing. The tech level is exceptionally high as well. It's a D. A D again indicating 13, which in terms of kind of a description of that, when you look it up, you see it's considered average stellar age, right? But it's on kind of the high end of that. So we have a battle dress has been developed here, so these kind of robotic armored suits, as well as fully developed artificial intelligence. Cloning is available, as well as DNA modification being somewhat common, right? So these are the types of technologies that would be around and available on this planet. Yeah. So I would like to come up with more about this planet. Um, so let's think some about it. So when I look at also in terms of trade codes, it is considered a garden planet, right? And that really just has implications for if you're doing speculative trading, then that provides some bonuses for certain types of materials that you may perhaps be buying and trying to trade with. So just to provide a sense of that, let me pull this up. Okay. Need to remember how the trade system works. No. Cybernetics. No, no, no. Space travel. There's space travel. Right. Here we go. Speculative cargo. So when you have your own ship, you have a couple ways you can try to make money with it. So one is just by um, selling um, selling passage and also just carrying cargo for people. But that is generally considered to not be extremely profitable, and that it will provide a profit right here. The formula is profit will be 1,000 credits times 2d6, right? So you're going to end up somewhere between 2,000 and 12,000 credits for a particular run. Okay. And that is assuming that you have whoever's making the admin role is actually going to succeed at that. Okay. Which is not a guarantee. Now, the other option is to sell speculative cargo. So, what happens with selling speculative cargo is that whatever planet you happen to be on, you try to make connections using things like your broker skill or perhaps using other skills like streetwise or something like that for things that are more um, of questionable legality. That's it. Right. So then what you do is, assuming that you can actually find speculative cargo, you would roll 2d6, and that tells you the type of target market you're dealing with. Right. So just so you know, the most common thing you're going to end up with is industrial. So you'd end up with things like, right, so industrial would be the target market. So going to be carrying things like food, medicine, minerals, crystals, radioactives, metals. These are the types of things you'd be carrying. Meanwhile, it might be that when you roll this 2d6, you end up with something like, say I wanted to end up with something that was usable for here. So garden worlds, it turns out, are never a target market from what I've seen. It's just what I see here. All right, so that is something that will be useful is knowing the trade codes for the different um, planets because that's going to help determine what kind of money can be made. Okay. All right, so I guess that is that. All right, so when I think more about this world, right, so very important. So I want to have here, so tens of millions, but amongst just a few small islands. So I want to do a little bit of math on this. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull up my spreadsheet program here. Okay, so I've got Excel working for me. Now what we know is that our diameter is 6,400 kilometers. So what does that come to in, well, actually, no, I can just look at what is the surface area of Mars. Okay. Mars surface area. Okay, so it's 55.74 million square miles. All right. Yeah, let's make that in kilometers. Okay, 144.4 million square kilometers. There we go. That's going to keep things like while I, being an American, would prefer the square miles, I think in terms of the calculations, I would prefer the kilometers. All right, so we've got 144.4 million square kilometers, and we have tens of millions. All right, so let's say there are about 50 million people here. Okay. And now of that space, 144.4 million square kilometers, we know that about 90% of it is water. Right? So that means that we have about 50 million people living on, I'm just doing the math, 14.44 million square kilometers. Right. So if you do the math on that one, so you have 50 million people divided by 14.44 million square kilometers. So we're talking about, yeah, roughly 3.5 people per square kilometers. That's actually not that dense, really, when you think about it. Um, let me look up just population density in countries. So countries by population density in the US. So by square kilometer, so Australia. So it's basically as densely populated as Australia is. Australia is 3.5 people. Uh, it's almost exactly the same, actually. Okay, that's actually kind of interesting. Australia, in terms of its land area and population, is about half on both of those measures. What was suggested here? Okay. So my first thought was that this is going to be extremely densely populated, but I don't think that that's actually true. Um, After all, I guess, okay, my problem is that I was thinking we're shrinking space, and tens of millions feels like a lot of people, but at the same time, right, we have tens of millions of people living in California, and I mean, California, well, somewhat densely populated. I mean, it's not like Coruscant or something like that. It's not like Hong Kong. And so, yeah, so that's not actually that was the kind of image in my mind was something like city planet, but that's not what this is. It doesn't seem like. So so it does suggest to me. So we have a few small islands. The islands aren't going to be out. Total land area between them is going to be basically the same as Australia. So it's not exceptionally small, I suppose. But I still think it's probably going to be true just because of the way people are. And because of the very high law level, that suggests that we do have fairly high density. So I'm going to suggest here that there are a few islands. Some are basically uninhabited, others very densely populated. And actually, what I'm imagining now is that there's an area that's very much like kind of New York City, where you have a number of islands that are all close together, and that is where kind of the capital city is. Okay, so I'm going to say there are a few islands that are close together, connected by bridges, a la New York City. Right, right. So, and this is the capital. So while there is some wilderness on this world, it's mostly going to be um, well, it's not mostly, but most of the action where human beings are is actually fairly densely populated. Okay, so I think that makes some degree of sense. So that is where we are headed. So the question is, why are we headed there? So that is something I think connecting back. Okay, so we know that Wilbur wants to relax, Garrett wants a fortune, and Hazel is seeking her lost lover. Right, so let me pull that information just to remind myself what this was like. So, seeking a missing friend, we know that she had in her background an ex-lover by the name of Charles. So we know that she is seeking him. So I'm wondering whether perhaps one of the things that could have happened kind of off screen is that we got news, right, that Charles may possibly right, be on Masoyama. So we are slowly making our way there. Understanding, of course, that each of these trips is going to be costly, right? So it's going to take us a while to get there, but we are making our way right toward Masoyama. So I like that. I think I'm going to work that in. Um, and that's going to be the reason that we are starting to move that direction. I think the guys are fine regardless. As far as Garrett is concerned, as long as there's money to be made, he's fine. As far as Wilbur is concerned, as long as he doesn't have to take on a stressful job. Uh, I think that he likes the freedom of being able to freelance. Right, so he's taken on some stressful jobs before, let's be honest. Right, but as long as he has the freedom to freelance, I think he is okay. Right, so that is where I think we are in terms of all of this. So I think I'm going to wrap this episode there. Like I said, not really a lot of story happening here, just planning what's happening next. So I think the next step we're going to do, so come next session, we are going to have taken a trip right, from Tanis right, to 506 here, which I'm going to come up with a name for, and we'll flesh out more about that planet. But that is a matter for next time. For now, this is Prof E, signing off.